Hey guys, it's Mr. H. Once again, you probably just saw me because you were watching a video. Nice to see you. How are you doing? Anyhow, in a couple of the other videos, this is a follow-up one to the distributor portion of these, this little mini series that I made, and we just got done talking about points, which are these guys here. We talked about how the distributor, this cam that's on here, two corners are pretty much worn out, and there's no adjustment left on these points. So this is just boom, giant paperweight, put it in the trash. But another thing we're going to talk about now is we talked about the primary side, which is this bottom portion of the distributor. So this is deciding when to open and close that circuit for the coil to induce that spark. So 12.6 primary side, weak, battery side. Now let's talk about the top side. So we're going to take a cap and a rotor. But wait, the rotor has to go on the inside. Cap and rotor. Close enough. But anyway, we're going to talk about that. Now we're going to talk about the secondary side. So we're going to talk about high voltage side. We're talking about kV, thousands of volts. So once we got past the original setup, which was, the positive portion, it's even labeled on this. You can see, the plus, the minus. So, we have the positive one that's going from, the battery itself, then the negative one, and then the switch is on the negative side here. So it tells, okay, that portion where it's making contact, okay, that's going to be our, our coil saturation period. And, now we're going to, once we get to that lug on there where we open up the points, that's going to induce the bang that's going to happen through the secondary windings on this guy, the fine, very fine coil windings. Now, we got through that. Now what? What happens after we get to that? Well, it comes out this top portion of a coil, or whatever coil you may have. Now this would not be working with a distributor, but here's another coil. So whatever side the spark plug is going to be attached to. So you have a spark plug wire going from that coil, and where it would go is it would lead to the cap on a distributor. I don't think this is for this one. There, just to make it, we're going to make it work with that one. But anyway, most times you're going to see a cap is indexed. You can tell that, well, some of them are not, but most of them you're going to see they're going to have like a notch, and it's going to show you where this is located. This is where it sits. They'll show you the orientation of how it rotates, but you got to be careful. Always be careful, because the ones with like the little 2 set screws, always start them very carefully. You do not want to strip those out. And you'll know what I mean if you ever do one. There's 2 little spring wound set screws usually that you have to wind in and turn with a really small screwdriver. Just be careful, or it could be even just a small socket. Just be careful. Do not strip them. Just kind of thread them in equally, one at a time. Don't just do one, because you can get cockeyed and then strip out the other side. But be very careful and don't lose them. They can easily fall into, crevice in the intake manifold. And when you do intake manifold gaskets, if it falls into one of the intake runners, then you have an issue with valve clearance, or it may get punched into a piston. There's horror stories with that. So just be very careful. Good work ethic. Now, when we talk about the kV that's going from here to here, we're going to talk about a spark plug wire, a designated coil wire that's going from the top of this one, carrying that kV to the center lug on the top of the cap. It always goes to the center lug on top of the cap, never anywhere else. Or it'll be interesting, but you're not going to get anything. Center lug at the top of the cap. So if we took this, now that I put it on really quickly, now if you take it off, so if we were to take a look at let's say the inside of this cap, what you would see is this little pintle here right in the center. And what happens is on the inside of this cam lobe, as it, not the cam lobe, but the actual distributor shaft, you would have a rotor that sits on top here that spins. And that rotor has a tab, an arm that goes out, and its job is to almost make contact with any of the other lugs on the outside, which would be for the spark plug wires itself. So you can see on the inside there, as this rotor would rotate, now this is not the right size one for this one, but as it would rotate, every time a spark would be sent through here, whatever notch it's lined up with, that's the one that's going to get the spark, you know, just like Wheel of Fortune, you know, which one's it going to get? It's going to line up with one of those tabs, it's going to jump, and it's going to make that contact to go to the cylinder with that spark plug. So we have that. Now, over time, things you can expect is obviously this is going to be spring loaded. It's either on the inside or on the actual tab itself, it'll be spring loaded, and it's going to always make contact with that. But just like anything else, you might get carbon buildup or carbon tracking on there. It might get burnt up, you know, micro weld, whatever you want to think of it as. And another thing is, just like anything else, these guys can get burnt up as well. You can get carbon, they can get burnt up. They can get all sorts of corrosion buildup on them over time. A cap could crack, and a crack you might not even be able to see on some caps, but you can tell by what we call carbon tracking. So carbon tracking, you can tell on spark plugs, usually you'll see it, is when, you know, electricity finds the path of least resistance and it decides, hey, I'm going to take a shortcut instead to get to ground. Usually on spark plug wires, you can see that as, you know, a line of white chalkiness on the wire where it might be coming close to contact with, like, let's say some piece of metal on the engine, whether it's a bracket or something, a spark plug rubs against it for a long period of time. You might notice there's this white, sort of like white dust or a line that creates on the plug itself. That actually means the electricity is jumping from the inside of that actual plug wire to ground. So it may be still firing the plug, but it might be intermittently just saying, hey, this is an easier route, so I'm going over here. Same thing can happen in a cap. So if this were to ever crack, instead of going from here to, let's say, here, which might be a lot of resistance for that kV to jump, if something were to happen where this cap cracked or something like that and it could find a different way to just ground itself out, it's going to do that. But anyhow, coming in the center, as this guy rotates, it's going to determine where is that kV going, where's those kilovolts going. So it's going to go, you know, whatever the rotor is pointing to, that's where it's going to send the spark. And then from there, that's where the importance of firing order comes in and putting the spark plugs in the correct line to the correct cylinder. So as it rotates clockwise, you're going to see, you know, maybe this is cylinder. So let's do a Chevy 350. Okay. So what would that be? 187, 365, 17. Can't remember now. I just talked about it yesterday too. Oh well. But anyway, let's make up our own order. So we got 1, 8, 7, 3, 6, 5, 4, 2. Let's say that's the order as it goes around. That's your firing order. You got to make sure each plug wire is going to that cylinder in that direct order. If you mix them up, you're going to send a spark, you know, the Wheel of Fortune to the wrong cylinder, and then you'll have a misfire because that spark is going through the spark plug at the wrong stroke on the engine cycle for that cylinder. So that's why it's important. Once you get to the secondary side, which is the high current side on the cap, the rotor and the cap, and to the plug wires and so on and so forth, that the firing order becomes very important. You don't have to worry about it with, you know, putting the cap on or anything like that, but it's very important that you match the wires up correctly to the cylinders for the firing order. Otherwise, you've just made your own firing order and the engine has no clue what you did or that it has a new firing order. So it's not going to work out in your favor. So always, if you're taking one of these out or if you're servicing one, a nice trick is to, you know, if you're just doing a check or, you know, maybe doing points or something like that, everything else is good, what I would typically recommend is, you know, maybe just removing just the coil wire. Sometimes you have enough give and enough wire length that you can take the cap and just flip it over with all the wires attached. You know, if you're doing just a visual inspection, you know, flip it over with all the wires still on. Don't take any off. Do a visual check, make sure you don't have extreme carbon tracking or, you know, no burnt contact pieces or corrosion and stuff like that, and then you can just flip it back on. Never ever just start yanking wires off without, you know, looking at which ones go where or taking pictures, because then you're just like, I think this is where this one goes, and it just takes the guesswork out of things. You don't have to worry about, you know, I just touched this, I started up, and now it's missing like crazy. What did I do? Well, you might have just put the wires on wrong. So always do that. Take notes. Make sure you notice where all those wires go. If you do have to take them off, sometimes what I'll do is I'll take off one bank of wires. So for one side of the engine, you know, maybe they're all over here. I'll tape them or I'll have them labeled what cylinders they go to, and then I can take the other side and just flip it over. Or vice versa, if you're replacing, let's say, a cap and rotor, which would be maintenance for a tune-up or something along those lines. What you can do is you can have the new cap ready to go right there next to you, and as you have the old one there, you can literally have this lined up the correct way and go take it off of one, directly put it on the next cap, take the other one off, put it directly on the new cap, and just work your way through so it takes the guesswork once again. You don't have to worry about, oh, which one went where, but those are just a few tricks of the trade that you'll learn out there as you do some of the vehicles, because there's quite a few out on the road. If you ever run into like a Vortec 4.3 or something like that on a GM or anything else, this is still par for the course. This is still stuff that, you know, is done in shops and you might have to do. So, you know, if you're the guy who can do it, why not make the money doing it? So that is the secondary side of the circuit. That's high voltage. We talked in one of the other videos about points, about the primary side, low voltage, top portion of the distributor. Now we're determining where that KV is going. Because we finally controlled this guy to make our KV through the bottom side. Now we got to figure out, where does that voltage go now? Now that we've created thousands of volts, where do we want it to go? Well, this portion of the distributor now decides. Depending on where it's indexed as it spins, the spark goes through the top, hits the rotor, and then it plays the Wheel of Fortune game where it goes out to whatever point is lined up at that specific time, and then the spark plugs, you know, whatever wire goes to what plug for which cylinder needs to fire. That's how it gets there, and that's how we actually fire off the KV through that spark plug itself. It's been amazing. Mr. H here. I'll see you in the next video.